Welcome to the Slog Pod, the podcast most unlikely to get advertising dollars from Hobby Lobby, Home Depot, or Chick-fil-A anytime soon.
Let's get right into it. Hey, did you ever notice that the loudest voices online are usually selling something?
Of course.
They're selling ideas, their side, their lore, their cause, their purity. But outrage is the new buy now button. Outrage is like,
right. You will
everything.
Look at Twitter or X or Instagram, whatever it is now, right? It's basically a church sermon meeting a WWE fight, right? That's kind of where we're living. I guess what we're getting into today is our beliefs as a business model and how that's come to probably harm us socially, culturally, and we just kind of want to dive into that. As a therapist, I've often seen people just unable to heal or get through something because they've clung too tightly to a belief system that's basically defined their identity. They can't seem to get past that. And that's always a problem if you're not able to find that flexibility or move. And as you and I fight, and we're having these conversations to try to, as we say, slog through every day to figure out what's going on in our world, I think that fluidity is very important, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think the reason it's so important, especially in the context of what we've been talking about as far as just working together to build a healthier culture, to be more fluid in our thinking individually. The stakes are pretty high when you think about how we're all vulnerable. We are to this, to any belief system or any type of something we're being pitched. When it's built for profit alone, money, clicks, views, our attention,
Yeah,
that's problematic because we can miss the truth.
absolutely. Yeah, and it's amazing how it seems like we get connected to, well, business products, not to mention, think of news media and the news that we watch. They're getting paid through clicks, how we're getting drug into religion in that sense. I mean, the religion seems to me out of control when you're talking about televangelists and these, I mean, they're flying helicopters around the country and in these mega churches that are doing, I mean, take one look at it. It doesn't seem very humble to me, any of that. They're selling something. It seems completely obvious to me. And part of that is they're selling identity as well as those social systems and that belongingness that we all kind of seek.
Yeah.
That all seems to be par for the course, as well as we're getting into the politics of things too. So just our political identities and how we always seem to, once we identify with that, we run back to it almost every time. And I think you and I are trying to at least pick through what is truth constantly. And that seems very difficult to do. So again, I think one of our main themes is that we're all vulnerable to this, as you just said, right?
We are.
So, it's easy to get caught up in the psychology of outrage. As we're talking about getting our spikes of dopamine and our cortisol cycles and that sort of thing, we talked about the belonging thing when we've got shared enemies. And I think another one is there's something about us telling ourselves that we're right, that it's an ego boost, and we're constantly doing. So we seek it out. We don't seek truth anymore. We seek alignment, or we seek to be that product.
Because it's so much a part of our identity.
Absolutely.
And we've advertised ourselves that way. The stuff we repost or like, the way it works itself into the conversations we have with our friends and family, it becomes so much a part of us. We talk about how hard it is to change a belief. When that belief is married to your identity, the best divorce lawyer in the world ain't helping you out here. And I think we struggle with it too, just like anyone. And that's what we're coming from, a place of understanding that we know it happens to us too. I mean, if you looked at my Instagram search suggestions, a lot of golf, a lot of other things that I won't name, but a lot of golf, we just get stuck.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. We get stuck because it's comfortable, because it fits the image that we're presenting to the world. But if we're missing the truth, then there's a problem.
Yeah. And I think it's what we're dealing with now, as much as anything, once we get aligned with whatever it is, we start seeing things very rigidly or in a very polarized fashion. And if we're talking mental health, right, that we tend to see things in true or false, right, wrong. And it takes away that nuance that I think are answers in life and why we're having such a problem. Hell, the reason we're doing the Slog Pod is to try to deal with those nuances, right? Is to really take in all of the information and weigh it accurately, to be okay with it. wherever I end up, wherever you end up, hopefully our conversations, we're driving that. We're trying to find truth.
Yeah.
And we're okay with where that takes us. But I think we do, just as a culture, as a society, that we have a real problem with seeing things way oversimplified.
Well, I was just going to say it's hard work. It is a slog to do what you just described. Complex ideas, problems, those aren't the things that go viral. It's the simple stuff. That's why
Right.
outrage is such an easy sell.
Even when I think about Trump and talking about the media being the enemy, it's not the media that's the enemy. It's the falseness that's put out there or different narratives that aren't accurate. We need to find truth or even recognize that there is a truth sometimes. And I think that that's the problem. Now he's oversimplified it, going, well, these guys are bad and these guys are good. That's absolutely not the truth. Heck, every time somebody speaks out, I don't care who it is, these issues we're dealing with are complex. It's not just the media is bad or that they're wrong or that they're evil. It's not like that at all. And even saying that is, to me, is harmful to everyone, because then you start aligning people. Now the people that are aligned to that belief system, that politics, that product, right, of which I'm thinking of people in red hats, once you align yourself, that's where you're going to go. Then you take that hook, line, and sinker. Then you start seeing it black and white.
Mhm.
And it's certainly not that way at all.
Yeah. And remember, we talked too about the algorithm and how the algorithm will feed us what it
Yeah.
thinks we like. That's how those algorithms are built. The Social Dilemma, great documentary, kind of explains that. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I recognize that my algorithms on the platforms I interact with are definitely feeding me stuff. You talked about how once we have a belief, we tend to try to avoid or dismiss contrary evidence and actively seek out evidence that supports a belief or
Sure.
identity. That algorithm is literally doing that.
Right.
The news media organizations that have a particular angle or bent that they're trying to sell, they're doing that. We're outsourcing thinking to non-human entities and these large profit-driven corporations that own the media. So, if you fancy yourself a free-thinking, independent thought kind of person, I think it's helpful to remember that
Absolutely.
condition.
Right now, what we're talking about is having an awareness, having these conversations, and understanding that there's a monetization of identity. That is much more profitable to kind of get people, our entire American culture, or any culture for that matter, to pick a side rather than find the complexities or think it through. All of that, everything that you just talked about, these social platforms profit most when we pick a side, when we start hating each other.
Right.
Absolutely. It's just enough to keep you scrolling, to keep your attention. They get paid by attention. To me, it's not just dumb. That's dangerous. That's why we're having this conversation, because we're seeing it playing out in so many ways. This polarization of people, the culture we're in that we used to love. We want to. We've got friends, relatives, mates, business partners that think differently. And I don't know that if we really threw everything on the table that we would think that differently about many items. There's just this nuance and complexity that we need to talk to. And if we're selling anything, I've even thought maybe this is, how are we any different? How's the Slog Pod different?
Yeah.
How is our conversation different? And I think it comes down to, more than anything, because we'd like to monetize things too.
Mhm.
But I think that there's truth. There's a lack of dogma. We're selling flexibility. Right? If anything, we're selling, okay, well, if you don't like that, go somewhere else. We don't care. If Home Depot and Hobby Lobby don't want to advertise with us, I'm okay with that. Right?
Yeah.
But I think that that's where we're at, is we need to find that flexibility and really have these conversations that are complex.
You brought up religion earlier. I kind of see this whole social media thing almost becoming a new religion.
Mhm.
And I'm not even becoming, it is. It is a new religion for the masses. And some people hold it in companion with their, the religion of their fathers,
Mhm.
what they believe, but just in terms of how it operates, right? Anyone who's gone to church, I grew up in the Christian church as a kid. And, there was an identity, a belonging
Absolutely.
element to that, right? There was a value to me for that. There were answers to all the big questions. Religion was basically giving me the behaviors, the beliefs, the identity that I thought I was seeking at the time. And I think social media and these outrage platforms are giving us a form of that as well.
Absolutely.
And in church, you tithed, you gave a little bit of money to keep the church going. Well, here they're charging you, $9.99 a month for a subscription.
Right.
They're an outrage
Yep.
factory.
Yep.
So yeah,
So how do we, again, I think our answer to that is kind of what we're doing here, which is a podcast, but it's also conversations between you and I. How do we personally resist those shallow belief systems?
Mhm.
How do we get into the complexities, and how do we deal with that? Is we brought up our friends who are saying things online, that there's so much more nuance to these ideas. And I think things aren't being weighed accurately, or again, so much is driven by a preconceived identity. How do we change that? How do we get past that?
Well, I think we've taken care of step one. I think a great first step is just having that awareness. We're being emotionally hijacked in a lot of ways by what we're consuming.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
awareness one.
Yeah.
And then I think there's a mental health aspect, which is really more your lane.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of it's self-awareness, and we've talked about that a lot. Just having the value that flexibility and thought is key, and knowing that it's okay to let your identity flex, to change.
So it's almost like you're saying, once I acknowledge and recognize that I'm being sold a bill of goods or I'm being influenced.
That you're being influenced. I don't think you'd outright say that you're being sold. You just wouldn't do it because the identity is so strong. Those processes that we're talking about, it's so incredibly strong.
But you're saying once we have that acknowledgement, the next logical step is
To apply the fluid thinking and then seek that evidence that contradicts that.
that's the step. We miss that step of really looking at it and having some discernment.
Well, you have to have, to me, you have to have, and it's just like in anything in mental health, you kind of you have to want it, right? So when somebody comes to me and they're addicted to a substance, let's say, oftentimes you'll say, well, you got to want to get past, you got to want to see the other side, or you're just going to reinforce why that substance works for you.
Yeah.
And you've probably done that over and over and over again. No, you have to want it to a certain, in our previous episodes, we've talked about being better, be fucking better. I think that's it. That's what all that talks about is you have to start from a place of, I want change. I'm always wanting change. I do. Please offer me the contrary evidence. I want to take it in. That is very difficult. That's the slog we're constantly talking.
Yeah.
At least in the mental health sense. I think we should also ask, how do businesses and leaders avoid playing the same outrage game? Right? How do they do that? Can you answer me that? I mean, it's one thing to do it in mental health when we're talking about, as I just brought up, substance use or trauma, or you name the difficulty, right? But it's happening for businesses and leaders because they're doing the same thing, right? On macro scales. So I'm just asking, as we're having this discussion, what does that look like in a business sense?
Well, it's almost like you're saying we're asking for those people to have some awareness and have the desire to change their approach. Right? But now you're taking on the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
If they're profit driven, if they want to make money, they're going to look at that very cautiously in terms of changing that model because it works so darn well.
But so we're asking for a conscience, right?
Yes.
Or honest communication.
Yeah.
Right.
Honesty.
We need to identify virtue signaling and what that looks like. Know when it's there, either intuitively, or we need to see it or hear it from others. Thank you when you do that to me, and you pull it out, or identify something that I've accepted and kind of taken the hook on. Right. I think that that's what we're kind of getting at, or we hope people get at. And again, I think that that's what we're trying to do between you and I constantly. So I hope that makes sense. So I guess overall, the biggest question is, what does a healthy belief system look like in 2025? Is, again, why we're doing this is because things feel so completely out of control and so polarized, so identity based, so rigid, immovable, right? Can we even start a belief system that isn't profitable? Or what does that look like? What's health?
I would say my contribution to that would be, let's look at profit as generally and broadly as we can. Profit, we typically equate with money. But profit can also mean better health. For example, the Instagram influencer who was selling a weight loss routine or a certain nutritional plan, a smoking cessation program, they might be making money, but I think their profit, I would hope, also includes that bit of consciousness they have that, hey, I would really like to help people become healthier and better. I think that's what we're doing. We're not profiting a dollar on this, but I'm looking at our profit as the value that hopefully we're offering to people to improve their mental health outcomes and to contribute to a healthier, better society. Profit isn't just money.
No, and I think we've had many talks about this, and it always comes back to this. And maybe we've lost sight of that in our overall culture, not just individually. It's finding that balance. I don't look at profit as bad.
Right.
It is what it is, and that it isn't. Again, this isn't, rather than to oversimplify anything, there's a lot there. Profit, I would actually say, is good, and not completely, but like, let's align the values. Let's align thought and find balance, right?
Let's question what we're profiting from. Are we profiting from outrage, or are we profiting from things that benefit ourselves and our society?
I like that. It's a great point, right? So maybe it's time to kind of unsubscribe from outrage.
Unsubscribe from the newsletter.
Right.
Actually, not even the newsletter, the whole belief economy that we live in. It's time to unsubscribe.
So basically stop renting out your brain to the angriest person you see on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is that you follow.
Yeah.
That.
This certainly helps my peace of mind when I turn that crap off, even for a minute.
It does.
I get sucked right back into it just like the rest of us. But I love what you said, awareness and then desire. The desire, the willingness, the want to change. That's the step.
Be better.
Yeah.
You got to want to. And I think we're wanting to so bad, we're putting together a stupid podcast to get this out, to try to have these discussions and find balance and find health. That's it. We're discovering health. We're trying to figure it out, and it's not easy. That is the slog. It sucks, right? So not easy to do, but I like where it's going. And overall, when we talk about that business connection to identity and profit motive and that sort of thing, I think hopefully we're finding balance, and we're asking everybody else to.
Yep. And we're also asking you to like, subscribe, follow, share this.
Share it with somebody else who need to hear that, because I think as a culture, we're not having the discussion that we're having right now.
That's right.
Or, more than anything, we're reinforcing our belief or an identity and just seeking out the loudest person, wherever that is, reinforcing our identity. So.
Yeah. If you're out there and you feel like, yes, I'm definitely in the slog and I'm feeling lonely, it's hard work, but you're not alone. I think there's a whole community of people out there who feel the slog every day.
Yep.
And I hope this conversation brings them some value and some inspiration. And yeah, share it.
Help us all get through the slog.
Yeah, let's do it together. It's a lot easier that way. That's all for now.
All right. Cheers. Cheers.